People would remember this day for the speeches, the applause, the proud parents, but none of them knew that the real story began the moment a quiet janitor walked into the graduation hall, just hoping nobody would notice him. Yet within the next hour, the Navy Admiral sitting on stage would rise to his feet, frozen in shock, because of the tattoo on that janitor's arm. And before the ceremony ended, hundreds would learn a truth that would redefine honor, sacrifice, and what it really means to be a father. So if you're watching this, make sure you like the video and subscribe, because what you're about to hear is a story you'll never forget. Ethan Cole held his mop like a shield as he stood in the back corner of Ridgeview High's packed auditorium. His son, Luke, was graduating today. He hadn't expected to even be allowed inside because, as Ethan often reminded himself, people like him didn't belong in the front rows. His uniform wasn't polished, it was stained. His hands weren't soft, they were scarred. And the job title on his ID badge wasn't captain, commander, or chief. It was simply janitor. Still, he had promised Luke he'd be there, no matter what. Luke didn't know the whole truth. He didn't know why his father kept a photo locked in his wallet, why he sometimes woke up in a cold sweat whispering coordinates, or why he avoided places with flags and uniforms. The only tattoo Ethan carried, an old, faded mark on his forearm, was the closest thing to a clue. But even that was something he refused to talk about. Rows of proud parents filled the hall. Mothers in elegant dresses. Fathers in crisp suits. Cameras flashing. People smiling. Ethan stayed behind a pillar, almost hiding. He wasn't invited to sit with the parents, but he didn't mind. Just seeing Luke on stage was enough. Up on the platform sat Admiral Blake Harrison, highly decorated, stone-faced, and respected across the Navy. Nobody knew he had come to this small-town graduation for a personal reason. His nephew was graduating too. But fate had brought him there for something far more important. As the ceremony began, Luke walked in with the graduates. Ethan's eyes filled with pride. He remembered nights working double shifts, skipping meals, and hiding tears when Luke slept, just to keep the lights on. Luke never complained. Instead, he studied harder, pushed himself further, and dreamed bigger. Halfway through the ceremony, Ethan quietly moved closer to take a picture. A group of parents stepped aside, making room. But as he did, his sleeve caught on a chair, pulling it just enough to reveal that tattoo on his arm, an emblem only known to a very, very specific group within the U.S. military. A shadow shifted on the stage. Admiral Harrison, mid-conversation with another officer, glanced toward the movement. His eyes landed on the tattoo. The world seemed to stop. His lips parted. His face drained of color. He knew that symbol. He hadn't seen it in over 20 years. He stood so abruptly that the audience looked up. Ethan froze. Their eyes met. The Admiral took one step forward, then another, his expression filled with disbelief, fear, respect, something powerful enough to silence an entire room. "Ghost," the Admiral whispered. The microphone on his collar caught it, echoing through the hall. People turned. Luke frowned in confusion. Teachers whispered. The word meant nothing to them, but everything to a handful of men who had once served in the darkest parts of the world. Ethan closed his eyes. He had spent years hiding that name. He stepped back, shaking his head, but the Admiral was already walking down the steps. When he reached Ethan, he didn't salute, he simply placed a trembling hand on his shoulder. "I thought you were dead," the Admiral said. "The world thought you were dead." Ethan whispered, "Please, not here." But the Admiral turned to the audience and spoke into the microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen, this man, this janitor, is not who you think he is. He is one of the most decorated, most classified, most irreplaceable operators the Navy ever produced. A man whose missions remain sealed to this day." Gasps filled the hall. Luke blinked rapidly, looking as if the ground had tilted beneath him. The Admiral continued, emotion thick in his voice. "We called him Ghost, because nobody ever saw him. But today, for the first time, I'm honored to stand in front of him." Ethan clenched his jaw. He didn't want this attention. He didn't want praise. He wanted his son to have his moment. That's why he left. That's why he lived in silence. That's why he cleaned floors instead of holding rank. He stepped toward the microphone, trembling. "I'm just a janitor now. And I'm here as a father, nothing more." Luke suddenly ran toward him, ignoring the protocol, the ceremony, the speeches. He hugged his father tightly, burying his face in his chest. "Dad, why didn't you tell me?" Ethan whispered, "Because your dreams are supposed to be bigger than my past." The room fell into a heavy silence. Then Luke pulled back, wiping his eyes. "You were a hero, all this time." "I was a father," Ethan corrected softly. "Being a hero once doesn't matter. Being your dad always will." The Admiral stepped forward. "Son, your father saved entire units, risked his life more times than we can count. His last mission," he paused, voice trembling. "He volunteered alone so the rest of us could live." Ethan looked away, the memory painful. Luke turned to him again. "I'm proud of you." Ethan finally let his walls fall. Tears he had held for years slipped down his cheeks. "And I'm proud of you, Luke. Today is your day." The Admiral raised his hand. If it's truly his day, then he deserves to receive his diploma from the bravest man in this hall. Ethan shook his head. "No, I can't." But Luke grabbed his hand. "Dad, please." And for the first time in decades, Ethan Cole walked forward, not as a ghost, not as a legend, but as a father. He stood at the center of the stage, his son beside him, the entire hall rising to their feet in a standing ovation. Ethan handed Luke his diploma, and the applause thundered like waves. After the ceremony, people approached him, but Ethan slipped away quietly to the back hallway. He didn't want glory. He didn't want recognition. He wanted peace. Luke found him leaning against the wall. "Dad, what now?" Ethan smiled softly. "Now, you live your life. Bigger, brighter, and freer than mine ever was." Luke hesitated, then asked, "Can I tell people who you were?" Ethan shook his head. "No, son. Tell them who I am. A father who never gave up." Luke hugged him again. And for the first time in his life, Ethan felt seen, not as a shadow, not as a ghost, but as a man who had finally stepped back into the light. As they walked out, father and son, the Admiral watched from afar, whispering to himself the same words many watching this video might feel. Some heroes don't want medals. They just want to see their children succeed. And that is a legacy far greater than any rank.